So yeah, there's definitely some times where you feel like I'm very alone. And I think, especially when you're transparent, like you said, and it doesn't go the way you intended or had hoped for. And I think those are times where I reach out to my mentor, or I'll take some time to reflect. And usually in my reflection, after I blow off maybe some steam and frustration, it really gets down to, in my opinion, people have, they have different values sometimes.
Welcome to On Board with Transparent Leadership, an Easterseals podcast. I'm Kendra Davenport, President and CEO of Easterseals, and I am joined today by Donna Elbrecht. Donna is President and CEO of Easterseals Northern Indiana. And as I told Donna when we first started, I'm thrilled to be speaking with her because I love talking with female leaders. I think the workplace for women is very different than it is for men, and I love the opportunity to speak with women like Donna about their leadership. So starting there, I know you are a CEO in the Easterseals Network. I know your affiliate does great things, but for our listeners, talk a little bit, if you will, Donna, about what got you here. Where'd you start? How'd you get to the point you are now? How'd you become a CEO? Where were you earlier in your career?
Sure. So it's kind of a funny story in that in college, I was getting my business degree, and to pay the bills, I worked in a group home for people with disabilities and was able to work 40 hours every weekend that I wanted to work to help pay the bills. I fell in love with the work. I graduated. The exciting thing for me at my college graduation were the individuals I had supported for 4 years were at my graduation celebrating with me. So I got recruited to Des Moines, Iowa to work at a Fortune 500 financial company and enjoyed the work. It was nice and rewarding, but I truly missed working with people with disabilities. So I saw that Easterseals, Iowa was hiring for an employment consultant. They told me I was overqualified and they didn't pay well, and they were right on the pay for sure. So I started there and was just fortunate and blessed to do every job up to and including being the CEO in Iowa. So had a great time working with Sherry through the years, Sherry Nielsen, who I admire greatly. So me becoming a CEO happened very organically. I think just in terms of I would get to a certain part in the organization. There was new challenges that I always loved to take on, and it kind of just went from there. So in total, I've been with Easterseals 30 years between my time in Iowa and my time back here home in Fort Wayne in Indiana.
Incredible. You know, I hear that a lot though. And you know this, you've been around long enough, 3 decades, you know, that's sort of emblematic of service within Easterseals. And yet I think that's really unique to Easterseals. You just don't hear that very often when you talk with people who are even in federated models such as ours. Can you talk a little bit about why you stay and how do you keep,
Sure.
you know, I'll give a little aside. One time in a previous role, I was at an event with my husband and he asked someone who said, you know, oh, I've been in my same role for 30 years. He was like, well, how do you keep that fresh? And the person was so insulted. and I had to go back to them and say, he didn't mean anything by that. He was really serious. But I actually think embedded in his, you know, maybe not the most delicate way he asked is a good question.
Sure.
What keeps you motivated? That's a long time. Is the job, I would assume, well, I don't want to answer for you. So tell me,
Yeah, I think
keeps it fresh?
what keeps it fresh for me constantly are the individuals we support and what's changed over 30 years. Although we still are going to continue to work on employment and transportation and some of those core things, it's been exciting in my career to look at things pre-ADA to post-ADA. It's been interesting to see, you know, in Iowa, our team there did some phenomenal work with farmers that had disabilities, and to see how that was replicated. I think, you know, what keeps me going are the families that need us each and every day, how the needs have changed, but they still need us to be someone they can rely on, no matter if their kid is 17 today until when they're adults and later in life. And so I think that, and the creative people. I mean, I've got lifelong friends that are also CEOs at through the Easterseals Network. We have great staff locally as well. So it's definitely the people for me.
Oh, I love that. Let's go back to something you touched on, and that's the ADA. For any of our listeners who don't know, that's the Americans with Disabilities Act. It was passed about 33, 34 years ago. And yet not a whole lot has been changed in terms of modifications, in terms of updating. And so when I'm asked what the most challenging thing is for Easterseals right now, it's in elevating awareness, public awareness. Can you talk a little bit about how that influences your day-to-day?
Sure. I think, the ADA did bring awareness, and we're always going to have to continue to educate families about different rights they have, first and foremost. I also think, always working collaboratively with different municipalities, employers. I was able to join you and some others at the Aspen Institute when we talk with employers about being ready to hire people with disabilities. That's a change just from many years ago when people kind of probably, that's not on my radar, but to have a convening that National did with Aspen Institute really showed me how far we've come, because National Easterseals was able to convene some pretty hefty leaders in different organizations and different businesses that probably 30 years ago would have been kind of like more difficult to do. I do think, when it comes to advocacy for folks, one of the things that's a strength of Easterseals, and like a lot of strength can be a negative, is we do so much. We do so much. And that's always helpful to try to figure out what's someone's passion, to find out kind of what piece of Easterseals you zone in on. But it can also be daunting to try to really figure out how to lift all boats, because we do so much.
Absolutely. And that's, we recently hired a phenomenal woman to work in planned giving, Carrie O'Rourke. And Carrie O'Rourke often cites something that she was told when she first started, and that's, you meet one Easterseals, you met one Easterseals. Everybody is different. And that's kind of you hit the nail on the head. It is tricky to tell people succinctly, concisely, what Easterseals does. And I think it's why people like you are so important, because you're on the front lines. I think your messaging is far different than someone at the national offices would be. But I also want to go back to your previous answer and talk about something else. You said, and I'm paraphrasing obviously, but you said you derive, some of your freshness. What keeps this job interesting is the people with whom you work, other CEOs. Is there somebody in your career you think of as a mentor that you went to previously, or that you go to now for support? And if so, and I'm fairly certain you're going to say yes, can you share what you get from that relationship, or what you bring to them?
Sure. I think growing up, first and foremost, my mentor always was my grandmother, who was born and raised through the Depression era. She had her 8th grade education and started our family business years ago.
What's the family business, Donna?
It was an audiovisual company that she started in her basement and put my dad and my sisters and I all through college. She had a grit and determination, and we all had to work in our family business. And I think what I learned from my grandmother is that ownership mentality, that no matter what the problem is, it's ours to solve. You can't just wait for somebody else to come along and do it. My more current mentor is Chuck Sirac. He built a huge company that he sold, Sweetwater Music and Sound. He's taught me a lot about thinking big. He was my mentor as we went through all the mergers and our huge growth that we went through, in terms of, have a vision, have some practicality, how you're going to execute that, but read the room and be flexible. I
Very
think,
thorough.
he's been really successful running a lot of different companies, and nothing's ever perfect. And yet, he also taught me always be authentic, be yourself, and good things will come.
True words. True words. Be yourself. I love that. And I think he's right. Um, Talk a little bit about your style of leadership. If someone didn't know you, you're in a job interview, not that you're going anywhere, but say you're in a job interview and they say to you, as I'm going to say, name the top thing that you think is important in leadership that you try to apply every day. What would that be?
I think communication for sure. Much like you in your role, Kendra, we have a lot of stakeholders, and each of them have different expectations of us. Each of them may want to know different aspects of what we do. And so I think customized communication is a big part of leadership for me. Thinking in terms of what are those expectations? I think listening is the biggest part of communication is listening. And I think being willing to hear the good and the bad has made me a good leader over the years, just because not everything is perfect. I know you like to read. One of my favorite books is The Oz Principle, and it's getting results through individual and organizational accountability. That taught me years ago that to have an accountable organization, we have to have accountable individuals, and what our pieces of that is. And it gets down to see it, own it, solve it, do it. And a lot of times, most leaders fail at that first piece of see it, truly seeing the circumstances, truly seeing the realities, not just the good stuff. And I think having that philosophy has also taught me to be a good communicator because of the fact that not everybody is going to see the information I have. So I have to be willing to share that, to share what I see, so they can get on board and help me solve things.
Thank you for that. And I agree. I agree. I'm always looking for better ways to communicate and asking people, what's your preferred mode of communication? Say with you, just your team.
Definitely in person. I mean, we are, it's gotten more challenging for me because, now we've grown so much with the two mergers, and then we've built that network structure. So all in total now, we have 1,100 employees, and we're pretty much over a much bigger geography. So I've had to change doing some town halls. It's frustrating because I'll never get to know all 1,100 employees the way I'd like to do. From when my parents and my grandmother, we had our family business and we knew everybody. So I've had to really work on a visibility plan and understand that people do need to see me for different reasons, and be real intentional about who I see, who else in my executive team, what does their visibility plan need to look like? Because a lot of it is showing up and then making sure you're making time to listen, but also share what's coming. So in person is always my preference. Again, sometimes I've had to do some different things with our growth, like the town halls and some other pieces, just to make sure you stay connected. I do monthly videos out to our teams, so they get a chance to hear a little bit what's happening. I always have another colleague of mine, one of our program staff, with me, because as we've gotten so big, everything we do is not the same in each community. Mm-hmm. So everybody likes just to hear what's happening in some of the different parts of the communities we serve as well.
I think a lot of what you're saying sort of mirrors the way I think of leadership, and by being a good communicator, I think you are, by virtue of that fact, transparent, right? You're more transparent than if you're not actively seeking to communicate and communicate consistently. And I would agree with you. I think since COVID, it's gotten harder to communicate with your teams, because most of us are working in a hybrid situation. Not everybody's coming to the office. And I think that's a good thing. I have days when I don't, but talk to me a little bit about your views on transparency. Can you be too transparent?
That's a good question. I think we saw some of that as we went through the mergers and our growth so quickly that, I'm typically somebody that's like, there really isn't secrets to have from people. I mean, what I know, I think more than ever, is that people closest to the work truly know better than I do. They tend to have better ideas in terms of when it gets down to, fine tuning how we're going to get from here to here. I think, when you're dealing with mergers, it's always a difficult proposition to bring people in before it gets out that you're doing something that's going to be a surprise to
Right.
people. So that was a real leadership learning experience for me, is how to balance my typical transparency to understanding there was a time and place to let different people know what at different times. But I think overall, transparency is a good thing. I think especially, but you have to be willing to hear the bad when you're transparent. It's not usually all the good things that you hear sometimes as a leader. But I also think you have to respect the fact that diversity of perspectives, roles, individuals' lived experiences will really help come to a better decision in the end.
100% agree with that. And let's talk a little bit about what's in one of the things entailed in that response. I think hearing the negative is tough at times. And one of our CEOs in our network, who was on my hiring committee, helped hire me, he said to me after I was hired, Kendra, it's super lonely in a CEO position. And at the time, I remember Donna thinking, no, it's not.
Yeah.
What's
It's
lonely about it?
It can be.
He was so right. He said, don't hesitate to call when you have one of those days where you feel totally alone. And I kept thinking, no, I'll never feel that way. There are those moments, right? When you put it out there and you are exercising transparency and you think, okay, I'm going to make this work because people are going to see that I'm being transparent, and it doesn't always work, or you don't always get the reaction, or you get a reaction, but it isn't what you started.
Exactly.
And so I do have a newfound appreciation for what he shared with me, which is that it is lonely in a leadership
It can be
position.
very lonely.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Have you ever had that experience?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Because there's times that you can't share certain things with your board, obviously, and you can't share things with your folks that you supervise and lead on a daily basis. So yeah, there's definitely some times where you feel like very alone, and I think especially when you're transparent, like you said, and it doesn't go the way you intended or had hoped for. And I think those are times where I reach out to my mentor, or I'll take some time to reflect. And usually in my reflection, after I blow off maybe some steam and frustration, it really gets down to, in my opinion, people they have different values sometimes. They also may have their own agendas that circumvent the greater good. And I think that's always a struggle, because you're not going to move somebody from their deeply held values that they believe or what they are intrinsically wanting for their purposes. It's really difficult, especially in challenging times, I think, to find people that look for the win-win-win. It's easier for people to want a win-lose scenario. And I think when you're transparent and you're trying to find a win-win-win, at least myself, you can be very vulnerable to people. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, that can be used against you.
Absolutely.
At a later
That's
time.
That's a tricky balance, right?
It is.
The more I read about leadership today and how leadership has evolved, the more I see, vulnerable leaders who exhibit vulnerability are more believable, more, trusted. And yet you exhibit that vulnerability and it can absolutely be used against you.
It absolutely can.
So,
but I keep doing it.
Yeah, ditto. I think ditto. Talk a little bit because, I think when you serve in a role like you do, where you're managing 1,000, 1,100 people, that it can be super rewarding for sure. You wouldn't keep doing it. You see the needle move. You see the process. You're igniting the process as the leader, but I think it can be draining too. And you are one of those people who is super dedicated to your job. It's evident in all you do, Donna. Talk a little bit, if you will, about how you fill up. What do you do to keep going? What do you do that replenishes your spirit, your drive, your mental self?
Yeah. Well, I spend a lot of time with family when I'm able to outside of work. And I think what rejuvenates me the most is to go spend time with the people we serve. If I'm having a bad day, to go to one of our locations and spend time, talk to a parent that we just help provide assistance to. I'll tell you what's energizing me now, and I've never played a game, is the esports. I'm on fire for it. Um, I am on fire for esports. I mean, it's been so fun to watch our individuals grow, their confidence, their communication skills, being able to work with non-disabled peers on different things. So it always kind of works out too, that even if I don't know something as a subject matter expert, I knew walking out of that meeting in October, how long ago, about e-gaming, I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be amazing. And so things like that typically, like I said, I don't know how to game, but it all made sense, right? People with disabilities play games, and it's a good way to connect. How can we be more intentional? So a lot of, I think just innovation keeps me very motivated, hearing and learning more about what are the trends. I was really impressed and proud of National Easterseals to put that information and research into really studying how prevalent game use is. As we sit now and we have our first gaming trailer that goes around to different schools and allows more interaction, pull up to businesses and have them come interact with our individuals and learn and break down barriers. I think innovation and just new things always keeps me really excited, even if it's something I never thought I'd be passionate about, like gaming.
Well, that totally makes sense, because I think of you as one of the most innovative leaders we have in our network, and someone who is open to new ideas and who always will answer the call. But also, as you and I have discussed, who will push us and say, National, have you considered this? Have you thought about this? Maybe you should do this. So I love that. Is there something that we are not doing as an organization that you think Easterseals writ large should really be doing to advance equity, inclusion, accessibility for people with disabilities? And I don't mean critically. I just mean, is there something that you would like to see done, or something that you think needs still to happen that hasn't?
Yeah, I think the innovation has been great. I think it's always going to be difficult in your role, Kendra, to find something that everybody is going to be a fan of, for a lot of reasons.
Truer words there were never spoken.
Yeah. So I say these comments with that pragmatic approach, that it's going to be very difficult for you to find something everybody can rally behind, because everybody's focused on their local communities and what their local affiliates do. That being said, just some of the work we've been doing here around social determinants of health and health equity, I think everybody can benefit across the network on understanding whether we're intentional or not, we are influencing people's health care. So is there something we can do across the country that's more intentional about that? One of the things we're doing for our state is leading the efforts on preventative health and for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And how can we be more involved with that, testing out for the state value-based payments? We have learned so much. Our staff have learned so much, because typically that's not something that we're in charge of, although we are part of it. And to really understand and uncover how we can be more impactful with that. I think, with Easterseals, whether your focus is children, adults, veterans, everybody has healthcare needs, even if it's to be more of a champion. What we realize is, unfortunately, there is some disparity with individuals. We were doing some work and realized that some physicians didn't want to refer some of our women for their breast mammograms, or for some colorectal screening that everybody else without a disability gets. And it was really cautioned around. I didn't want it to be invasive. I just remember saying, well, gosh, how much more is invasive than having colon cancer? I mean, so I think there's some room everybody collectively across our network could do with that, regardless of who you're supporting in those communities. I think for me, when you look at our purpose together, what unites us, you have to have people be healthy in order to really help them be as 100% involved in their community as they can be.
Truth. Absolutely true. Back to leadership and how you manage. I love this part. I love asking this question because I often learn from our podcast folks, whoever we're talking with. Is there something that you do? Maybe it's software. Maybe it's just a mental thing you do. Maybe it's, an exercise you write down or you participate in. Is there something you do every day that you consider part of your necessities to stay organized, stay on top of things, focused and moving forward that you can share?
Yeah, I think daily I go through a priority list. I'm also a huge fan of the McKinsey study that has the 6 traits of what a CEO should be doing. I look at that a lot in terms of where should I be spending my time, because as you know, as a leader, time is the one thing that's very limited sometimes, and I can get very drawn into a lot of things. And so I focus a lot on those 6 focus areas for CEOs, knowing that my schedule at some point should reflect that better than just a free for all. And so that helps me stay focused on the right things. I also believe in you have to have some white space in the day. There's days we don't have it. You're back to back to back to back.
Yep.
And yet I know as a CEO, that's not me doing my best work for everybody if I don't have time to take a step back and be more reflective of the future and growth opportunities. So I think a combination of those McKinsey 6 areas really helps me kind of objectively look at my schedule. My assistant knows to look at those as well and help me stay focused on where I need to be. And then having reflection time is just really important.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. Is there, I can think of 3 that I think of all the time and look to for advice, and maybe not advice, but sort of inspiration. And I'm talking about other NGOs. Is there one or more other nonprofit organization that you look at and think they got it right? I could learn a lot from them, or that you focus on, or that you look to routinely to see what they're doing?
Yeah, I think, well, we're duly branded with the ARC. And so we're, I think, the only affiliate that's Easterseals ARC. So I'm involved in a different capacity with the ARC. And I think that what I've learned from them, I think I'm in a good position because I grew up Easterseals, very much Easterseals. And then coming here, we were Easterseals ARC. And so what I've learned from the ARC is they've done a good job with grassroots advocacy and building family support and that the kind of the advocacy skills around grassroots. I've always looked at the Easterseals side of our brand as being more innovative, really more geared towards what makes sense in each community. Now, the ARCs, by and large, they do provide services, but not to the length that we do as Easterseals. But I think when I look at the ARC and people ask me what's the difference or what do you like about the ARC and Easterseals, I do think the ARC of the U.S. has done a really good job with that grassroots legislative advocacy. Although I don't think they do as well with some of the fundraising pieces they put out and really some of that program innovation. But I see that just because I have to work with that side a lot. So.
You and I have talked, not recently, but in the past, about bringing different organizations together, collaboration. What do you think inhibits? Because I've been, like you, I've been in nonprofit my entire career, and I've worked with a litany of different organizations. And yet, when you try to bring 2 organizations, even organizations doing the same thing together, it often is like a real difficult challenge.
It
What do
is.
you think inhibits that collaboration? Because maybe I sound like Pollyanna. I prefer to think I'm a cockeyed optimist, right? I believe the only way nonprofits survive into the future is to start collaborating in a much larger way. And yet there is terrific resistance to that.
Absolutely.
What do you think inhibits more organizations from saying, you know what, we're going to partner with you, not necessarily merge with you, but we're going to partner because together we're stronger, together we can economize, we can, create efficiencies. What do
Yeah,
you
I
think?
think my experience with the two mergers, and then as we built our model for more of a network where people can join the network, I think a lot of it comes from fear. It's really fear based. They're afraid they're going to give up their identity. They're afraid they're going to give up something. A lot of it's just good old healthy ego.
Yeah,
That there's
I tend to
there's
agree on that.
a kind of a sense of we can't do better with you because we're better already. I think a lot of it's that. I think what's made our mergers and our building of our network successful is it's happened on its own. It's not like I really went out to stake out those organizations. I was a good collaborator. I built good relationships. We were a helpful partner. And from those experiences, those conversations could kind of come more naturally. I do think it's just, I agree with you. I think nonprofits are going to have to look at collaborating to stay relevant and share a lot of resources moving forward. But I do think the things that stall it are it's a lot of ego and just fear of the unknown. What am I going to give up instead of thinking what can we gain? Um, and I think it's difficult for people to think my organization's been around for 70 years. How in the world could we let someone else come in and change our trajectory? And I think that's where values are really important. If you're going to look at collaboration, usually do that with people that share same values with you. Even if you're doing the same services, sometimes if you don't have the same values, it's still going to be kind of more knocking heads. Um, I remember the first merger we did here, people were like, oh, Donna, culture is the thing that's going to really, you're going to have to spend time. I'm like, oh, okay. And then I got into like, oh, okay, okay. So I think a lot of it's kind of that too. Like, people just, they do their work differently. But I think as the environment changes, we're going to have to do more together, whether that's as a network here for Easter Seals first and foremost, but also with, other industries out there that can help make things better for the people we serve.
Thank you for that. I think you have a unique perspective because you've been in nonprofit, larger scale for your entire career. But when I look right now at Easterseals, let's just take us. I see evolution happening, evolution of the needs. And we talked a little bit earlier about how much the breadth and scope and depth of Easterseals services that our affiliates provide. I like to think that we are super proactive, and that can be a blessing and a curse, right? Because we never say no. But Easterseals, I believe, does work that other organizations say, no, that's too complex, or that's not going to be cost effective or cost beneficial. The ROI financially is not going to justify what we're going to have to put into it. And yet I see things like food insecurity growing and becoming more of an issue for many of our affiliates, not just our program participants, but their families, their parents who are aging. Is there something, and maybe it's not a negative, maybe it's just something you've witnessed in terms of the evolution of your affiliate? I know you've merged a few times, but is there some service you're providing now or that you think you're going to have to provide to keep up with the evolution of society?
Yeah, and I think it depends on each community we're in. I think the rural communities we support are desperate need for a lot of different things. And so I think, when we work in some of our rural communities, we are the biggest employer usually. Um, we are seen as experts beyond what we probably are, just by virtue of how long we've been around, as well as our commitment to those communities. And so I think that's where we've been able to develop different partnerships with people in the community too. Is there a need that we can help convene and support without being the sole person doing that? I think more of that will come. I think, we've become one of our biggest places we do networking with and collaboration is with economic development, whether it's a bigger city or smaller. We're really at the table for economic development for a lot of reasons, not only employment of people with disabilities, but to your point, what are the needs of the community and how can we help the community meet their needs from an economic standpoint, not just a social one. And so I think, we have seen a lot of new opportunities from us being at the economic development table versus, just seen as yet another charity in the community, that we're here to help this community evolve economically. So count us in as a partner and then helping find solutions in a different manner than people are used to us seeing. We've really changed a lot of what we do because of our involvement with economic development.
You talked a lot about your staff, your team, engaging with them. Can you tell me two things? One thing that challenges you with respect to managing a team, and secondly, what's the thing you've learned from a team member or your team more broadly recently?
I think what challenges me in managing a team is making sure they all work well together without me. I think what's important to me as a leader is to make sure that the people that report to me, the C-suite, if you will, they always are trying to make me happy, and of course they should. But also they're cognizant of the people they supervise, and sometimes getting people to work more this way instead of just up and down. I think I work a lot on that, intentionally finding opportunities, even though I know maybe what needs to be done, but to create opportunities for them to work more this way together has brought a lot of value and learning to the team, as well as built their own kind of chops in terms of leadership, understanding the different pieces, whether you're a development person or you're the programs person or you're managing the finance team and HR, having them work collectively on what are some of the strategies that we need to develop, and then having them bring those to me has been really helpful for me and as well as the team. And so I do a lot of that and say, what are you all thinking? Sometimes I try not to be the first to offer input, just to listen. That's helped me a lot. And then the second thing to your question is what I've learned. I've learned it's really hard for people not to have a selfish agenda, even if they're good people and I love them dearly. It's really hard for people to not to have that. So oftentimes I'll try to get to that right away so we can move on. Like what's in it for you, or what are you thinking your role needs to be with this, so we can move that away. I also think the other thing I've learned in managing people is, as I've gone to the next level of leadership in my career, I've had to let go of things that brought me to that next level, intentionally let go of some things and pick up new skills. And I've really learned a lot these last few years with our growth that things I used to love being involved in and still would like to be involved in, I shouldn't be anymore. And that's, people always have to keep me in check with that. Just because I love it and I was used to doing it, now that we're so much bigger, I have to be cognizant.
It's tricky, right?
It's really tricky. I struggle with that on a daily sometimes. Like, well, I really just want to go down and do that. Like, really, Donna, we've got this. So I think that's what I'm going to struggle with a while, just because, when you start as a direct care person and you make it to the CEO level, and then you're growing so much, you have to let go of some things to get you to continue to grow the organization. That's hard.
It's hard, but I think that's what makes a great leader, right? And in your case, You're definitely empathetic, you're compassionate. and you started giving care in your current role. It's hard to step away from that
It
because I'm
is.
sure that fuels you.
It does.
And I feel that I'm not a care provider, but I feel, and you said it at the top of our discussion, when you see programs one-on-one, when you go out and you see the work being done, that's how I feel when I go to our affiliates and I see our programs in action. It is hard not to be moved by that.
We have
And
great things happening across the
oh,
country
I
at
think
Easter Seals.
absolutely,
It's been
absolutely.
the greatest part of my career at Easter Seals is getting to see other affiliates and getting to know peers that you can call and bounce things off of. It's we have a lot to be proud of.
To that point, what is something you admire most in other leaders? The quality.
I think I appreciate their transparency as well. It's easy to tell everybody all the good stuff that you're doing and brag and that, but I respect people that are like, yeah, this didn't work out for me. What are your thoughts about this? We really all learn by mistakes, but we don't like to talk about them
We
as much.
absolutely do. We
Uh,
absolutely do.
I value leaders that are like really ready just to get comfy with, here's what's working well and here's what's not. I think the other thing I admire in other leaders is their values. You can tell if someone's really authentic, and I like leaders that really you can tell it's genuine. It's not just talking points that someone gave them to share. It's very meaningful for them, and it's very apparent when you talk with them. I admire that with leaders, and I think the other thing I admire with leaders is some humility. Just kind of to my first point, I think we all have done great things in our career, which is what's led our organization to where it is today. But that could all be gone tomorrow. And I think humility allows you to really see reality more clearly instead of saying, we're great, we're going to be here for the next 70 years. Maybe not. I think humility to say what we've done is phenomenal. We have served people well, but we have to keep evolving. We have to keep growing. We have to keep changing. And I think humility is a big trait in that seeing reality.
Thank you. Thank you for your candor. I've got one more question for you. We like to end these episodes with a segment of Ask Me Anything. So stick around for that, folks who are listening, and I will answer a question. But before I go, I want to talk to you. You mentioned a book you were reading at the top of the segment. Is there any other book that you've read recently or that you're reading right now that you, and maybe it's not professional, maybe it's something fiction that you're just enjoying? I read a lot and I love to hear what other leaders are reading.
Yeah, I read a lot. So I read a lot of nonfiction. So a fun book I'm reading is Doris Kearns Goodwin's new book, because I think she does a great job. Yep. So I'm reading her new book that deals with her relationship with her husband, going through all what he did is working for the Kennedy campaign and Johnson and all kinds of things. So it's like a political, and her books, they read like novels. So I'm reading that. And the other one I just keep referencing is really it's I look at, because it's my shelf. It's all about the McKinsey article, and then there's a book about that with those kind of those elements of what CEOs should be concerned and worry about, or make sure it's top of mind. Just because as busy as you get, and as I've had to learn to drop things and pick new things up, it keeps me focused. So that's a couple of my reads.
It's tough. Thank you. It is tough to discern, and you've given us great insight into what makes you such a good leader. So thank you. Thanks for participating with me today. Always love talking with you.
Good to talk with you. I always appreciate what you're doing too. You've got a big job. There's days I'd be like, I would never want that job, but I'm glad you're in it, Kendra. I think we've come a great long way together as a network. I mean, there's always room for improvements. I think it's watching Easterseals for 30 years now and different phases of who we've been. We still have the same struggles to a certain degree. And I think at the same time, I've seen progress through the years. And so I'm glad that you're in that role, and will always be supportive.
Thank you for your support. And I'm glad to hear you think we're making progress. It's a
Yeah,
great
absolutely.
note to end on. Thanks,
Yes.
Donna.
Thank you.
Easterseals empowers people with disabilities and their families to be full and equal participants in their communities and within society. Easterseals is where everyone can feel welcomed and people know that they aren't judged, but treated with the dignity that they deserve. Each day, we provide life-changing services nationwide and advocate for policies that improve quality of life. From employment to housing services to job training, childcare and respite care, adult day programs, and so much more, Easterseals is making a profound impact in thousands of communities every day. You can learn more by visiting Easterseals.com. That concludes our episode. Thank you so much for listening. If you like what you heard, be sure to write a review, like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to join us in the next episode as we discuss how we can all get on board with transparent leadership.